We don't know if you've noticed this, but video games are very expensive. Yes, inflation and rising production costs are somewhat to blame, but that's not much of a consolation when a single title costs as much as it would to keep you stocked up on frozen pizzas for 5 months. We've done the maths, it's real. No matter how expensive games and their special editions get, however, there are some classic titles that will always be even more extortionate thanks to rarity or condition, which makes it so that few people are going to be able to ever realistically acquire them, and we're looking at some of those costly collector's items today. All of the prices noted here are the most up-to-date statistics we could find based on what these titles actually sold for at auctions within the past few years. The average person won't be able to buy them, no doubt, but if you happen to have a pristine copy of any of these, you could be sitting on a gold mine. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most valuable video games. Number 10. Nintendo World Championships 1990. NES, $180,000. The first title on our list is an especially intriguing and unique one, as the two different versions of the cartridge vary wildly in collectability and subsequently in price. Inspired partially by 1989 film The Wizard, the Nintendo World Championships were one of the first esports tournaments in, the world. Held in 1990 and hosted in 29 cities throughout the US as part of a Nintendo marketing promotion, the featured competition tested how quickly players could get through the 3 selected games, Super Mario Bros., Rad Racer, and Tetris, while accomplishing certain goals in the 6-minute and 21-second time limit. Only 116 cartridges were created in total, with 90 of them being grey cartridges that were handed out to the finalists of the competition, now worth around $15,000 on average, and 26 being special gold editions given out as part of a separate Nintendo Power Magazine contest, which often sell for around $100,000. Strangely, it was one of the grey cartridges that was sold for an incredible $180,000 in 2021. This particular copy of the game is an extremely well-preserved one, something which is rare for this title as they weren't built with longevity in mind, with the belief being that they were meant to be recycled after use. Nowadays though, Nintendo's trash has become someone else's treasure. Number 9. Final Fantasy, NES. $204,000. As the Western releases of the games prior to Final Fantasy VII did not follow the same numbering system as the Japanese releases, and there were several that didn't receive any localized version initially, it can get confusing when talking about the earlier entries. Thankfully, Final Fantasy for the NES is the same regardless of the region it was released in, and is, unsurprisingly, the first game in the series. This installment, originally released in 1987, follows 4 heroes known as the Warriors of Light, each with their own darkened elemental crystal that must be relit as they venture forth to defeat the evil in the land and save the world. The main reason this particular game is so valuable is due to the much-beloved franchise it established. Originally, the final part of the title was a reference to Square's belief that it would be their last game, as they thought they'd be going out of business. That, of course, was not the case at all, and has led to the original Final Fantasy becoming a prized collector's item. As such, a nearly perfect copy of the title, perhaps the most pristine version of the game in existence, sold for $204,000 in 2021. Time will tell whether that's its final price or not, sorry. Number 8. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, N64, $228,000. The first in the series to be fully 3-dimensional and one of the top contenders for greatest game ever made, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time has been re-released for almost every Nintendo system since it first showed up in 1998, but it is, unsurprisingly, the original N64 version that fetches the highest price nowadays. This particular entry in the epic fantasy series again follows Link, who learns that serial bad guy Ganondorf is up to his old Triforce-stealing tricks. After a 7-year time jump and the usual sequence of temples, Link can eventually make his way to the final confrontation and beat the evil pig man once more. It's hard to overstate the legacy this game has, both in gaming history in general and Zelda history in particular, and as such, original copies of Ocarina of Time can still go for a decent amount of money. For example, despite being only a standard edition of the beloved classic, a near-perfect copy of the game sold for a whopping $228,000 in the summer of 2021, proving that as long as it is beloved enough, there will always be someone willing to shell out a good amount of cash for it. Number 7. Resident Evil PS1, $264,000. In the world of horror, it's hard to imagine a time before Resident Evil, because while it was technically inspired by games that came before it, it was this one that really brought the genre into the mainstream and allowed for so many to come after it. This debut entry introduced players to Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and the whole STARS team as they take refuge in the ominous Spencer mansion after being attacked in the woods by monstrous zombie dogs, searching all of the rooms and solving the mansion's esoteric puzzles as they try to find the missing members of the group. Considering the lasting legacy of this long-running franchise, particularly in the survival horror space, it's no surprise that original versions of Resident Evil can go for an impressive price. A copy of this classic sold for $264,000 in October of 2021. What was happening in 2021? Mainly thanks to it being from the first production run of the title, and it's one of only a handful of copies in the world that remains sealed. This makes it the most expensive PlayStation game ever sold up to this point, and it is likely to get even more pricey as time goes on. Number 6. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! NES, $312,000. In this tough-as-nails fighting game, which has some of the most infamous bosses of all time, players take on the role of Little Mac, a boxer looking to fight his way through the ranks until he beats the eponymous boxer himself in one last extremely tough match. Originally starting life in arcades, it earned massive praise from critics and is perhaps one of the best-received fighting games ever made. The version of the game with Mike Tyson's name and likeness attached was a limited edition though, and was only available until the deal ran out in 1990, which has led to even less than perfect copies fetching a high price in certain circles online, going for around $50,000 on average. In the autumn of 2021 though, one particular unopened version of the infuriating classic sold for an impressive $312,000, over 6 times the amount that Tyson was reportedly paid for the original deal. This is not only due to its fantastic condition, but because it had the game's original title before it was renamed simply to Punch-Out, after the license expired and the final boss was changed, becoming Mr. Dream. I suppose the price is keeping with the theme, as it certainly is a knockout. Number 5. Super Mario World, SNES, $360,000. One of the best Mario games out there, as well as another contender for the title of best game ever, Super Mario World introduced all of the plumber's numerous fans to the most iconic video game mainstay of all time, Yoshi! Okay, that may be a slight exaggeration, but I challenge you to name a more recognizable bright green video game dinosaur. Go on. Oh, not the one from Toy Story. That's cheating. Once again, players are able to take control of either Mario or Luigi and guide them through the different levels of Dinosaur Land as they pursue Princess Peach, who has shockingly been kidnapped by Bowser. The addition of Yoshi changes up the gameplay, allowing players to hop on his back and use him to gobble up any number of enemies in their path. Despite, or perhaps because of, Super Mario World's status as the best-selling SNES game ever, sealed copies are extremely hard to come by, which led to one particular iteration selling for $360,000 in July, you'll never guess which year, 2021. This title may have an impressive price tag, but it's not the only time we're going to see Mario on this list, nor can this game's price hold a candle to the amount of cash its more expensive siblings can rake in. Number 4. Sonic the Hedgehog, Mega Drive, $420,000. Sega's iconic 90s mascot and resident speed enthusiast Sonic the Hedgehog has certainly had a turbulent lifespan over the past few decades of his existence, but there's no denying that the game that started it all is still one of the most fondly remembered video games of its era. The fast-paced, side-scrolling platformer not only introduced the world to the titular Spiky Lad, but Dr. Robotnik as well, as they chase each other down through the literal twists and turns of the different worlds, attempting to collect all the Chaos Emeralds they can before the other party can acquire them instead. Though it sold an impressive 24 million copies when it first released, the fact that it is incredibly hard to find an original copy of Sonic the Hedgehog has led to a frankly ridiculous markup in price for those remaining copies. One particular sealed version of the Blue Blur's original adventure sold for $420,000 nice dollars, despite it being considered of a lesser quality than many of the other copies of classics on this list, thanks to its aforementioned rarity. If you want to nab a copy of this elusive title, it's sure to go quickly, so you've gotta go fast and have a lot of spare money. That'd help as well. Number 3. The Legend of Zelda, NES, $870,000. In 1986, Japan witnessed the birth of a legend, the Legend of Zelda, to be more specific, as this humble dungeon-crawling adventure went on to become one of the most iconic franchises of all time, and a staple of Nintendo consoles ever since. Though it looks quite different than most of the titles that came after it, many key features of the series, such as Link, Ganon, the Triforce, and even locations such as Death Mountain have been there from this very first release. In July 2021, a copy of The Legend of Zelda sold for an incredible $870,000 and very briefly held the record for the most expensive video game ever sold before the next titles on our list came along later that year. It's all 2021, something went weird that year. This particular pricey piece is from the game's second production run, which was only available for a few short months towards the end of 1987, and is the oldest sealed copy of the game in existence, as well as the best preserved. While it's notoriously tough to go back to nowadays, like many games of that era, the fact that it's the origin of Link's many adventures and one from an extremely limited production run at that, make it an incredible collector's item today. Number 2. Super Mario 64. N64, $1.56 million. The game that essentially revolutionized 3D platformers almost single-handedly, and one whose influence can be felt even now, Super Mario 64 and its iconic hub world hardly need an introduction. It's perhaps not so surprising to see this momentous title make an appearance, given how much of gaming history we've explored in this exceedingly expensive wish list. The price tag, however, is a shockingly large amount. The first copy of a video game to be sold for over $1 million, this near-perfect example of one of the most important and beloved titles of all time remains unopened and is believed to be one of only 5 in the world still in mint condition, with it being the best of the best in even that exclusive list. To put it into perspective just how pristine this version is, another slightly less well-preserved copy sold at the same auction for a mere $13,200. As incredible as Super Mario 64 may be, it's hard to imagine paying such a huge amount of money for something you'll never be able to use, but somehow it's still not the most expensive classic game that's ever been sold. What is it? Number 1. Super Mario Bros. NES. $2 million. When Super Mario Bros. First released in 1985 for the NES, no one could have predicted the massive cultural phenomenon it would become. As they jump into the shoes of the iconic mustachioed plumber, players will platform their way through the Mushroom Kingdom, never resting until Bowser is defeated and they finally find the castle that houses their precious Princess Toadstool. One particularly expensive copy of the game, selling for $2 million in 2021, went for so much cash not only because it's in pristine condition with even the tab used to hang the game from sales racks still intact, but because it's a version from one of the original limited runs of the game in 1985, offered for only a few months before the game was ported to arcades and gradually released around the world over the following years. This means that it is the best preserved copy of one of the first ever releases of the first entry of perhaps the most beloved gaming franchise of all time, so it's hard to imagine anything topping the price of this incredible piece of gaming history anytime soon.